This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed. The weekly wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball. This week, Kate, the prospect for war in the Middle East is a big story. Also inflation, interest rates, negative gearing, accusations against Woolies and Coles.
By the ACCC, we also thought it might be time to give you an understanding about what's going on with Sean Combs, or Diddy, I think as he's known now, P Diddy, Puff Daddy, whatever you want to call him. That's been a big story that's been kicking around for a while now and sort of came to a head this week. We'll also have a look at the AFL Grand Final, especially the stuff outside of the game itself.
Yeah, there's plenty going on there. Katy Perry is a name to know.
She's everywhere at the moment. Let's get into it. Before we get into the news, a message from BHP. Copper is a big deal in the energy transition because it's used to make electric vehicles, wind turbines and solar panels. When it comes to producing copper responsibly, it's happening now at BHP. Biggest story this week outside of serious news to kick off though, Claire, was the Brownlow Medal. Between red carpets and the actual award itself, I guess that kind of makes sense. It covers a lot of bases for people.
Yeah, there is plenty going on there, plenty for everyone. Fashion meets footy has to be a bit of a moment. You and I have views about the red carpet, positive reviews though.
We're both very aware we're completely unqualified to make any sort of assessment on style.
I think I brushed my hair today.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure.
I don't even know if anyone's even interested in what we thought, but we thought they all looked lovely.
They looked very nice.
Yeah, it was very, very tasteful. And you pointed out that Monday night's a hard night to get dolled up and go out.
Black tie events midweek is difficult.
Black tie events at all are difficult. Yeah.
Monday, full stop. I have 2 quarantined nights for no going out. Sunday night, Monday night.
Okay.
Never going out on those nights. But I guess, let's face it, neither of us have really been out.
I was just trying to think when the last time I actually went out was. At all.
And you've got young kids, so that's an extra thing.
Kind of, but the effort, isn't it? I mean, if I got a Guernsey to the Brownlow, I would have gone.
It's a Monday night. I'd have to stick by the rules, I think.
You wouldn't have. Anyway, we thought they looked great, and we've got another red carpet coming up with the NRL's Dalian medal this week, so you can look forward to our review of that next week.
Can't wait.
Let's talk about war in the Middle East. That's been the biggest story this week.
Yeah, it really has. There's the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Of course, there's airstrikes going backwards and forwards, but it's really what's happening in Lebanon that's been the focus. Monday was the deadliest day for Lebanon since the war in 2006. By Friday morning, the government there said at least 600 people had been killed by Israeli airstrikes.
I listened to an episode of The Daily, the New York Times podcast that we talk about a lot, and it gave really good context around that 2006 war, if you don't know what we're talking about there. There's another round of displaced people on both sides of the border, Claire.
So Monday was clearly huge. Israel said that they struck 1,600 Hezbollah targets across Lebanon. The thing to note there is that a lot of those targets, they say, are in homes. So Israel says Hezbollah has stored weapons in homes, particularly in that southern region. It's why residents of villages in that area, some in Beirut as well, received messages and phone calls. It was generated by Israel but used a Lebanese number. That was early on Monday. It was ordering them to move away.
Yeah, that also raised issues for Lebanese officials. They say Israel has hacked into their telecommunications network, so lots of discussion about whether they should be doing that or not. When it comes to the deaths there, they include women, children and medics. It's unclear how many of the casualties were Hezbollah militants, though Israel says many of them were. The airstrikes weren't all one way, though. Israel just managed to defend themselves a bit better.
Yeah, they've got that Iron Dome, of course, which is the anti-missile air defence system. It's one of the most advanced in the world.
Shortcut on that?
Yeah, I reckon there probably has to be at some point because it is a big feature. And actually we're looking at building one in the Pacific region. That's another issue that's sort of come up when it comes to future defences.
I think it's got to go on the list because we will talk about the Iron Dome a lot. But sorry, I have interrupted you.
No, that's okay. Hezbollah fired nearly 200 rockets on northern Israel on Monday. It was mainly targeting their military bases though.
Israel says it's intercepted most of those. That's because of, as you say, that Iron Dome. Lots of airstrikes going back and forth is the long story short. That's something that's not new. That's happened many times over decades. It might not end there, though, as we get to the end of the week. We saw Israel not ruling out the possibility of a ground invasion.
Yeah, that's according to Israel's military chief. What he said this week was that the airstrikes could pave the way for troops to go in, as we saw in Gaza. That's exactly what happened there. What he said is the goal is very clear: to safely return residents of the north of Israel, that is. And to do that, we will enter enemy territory.
That's really set the cat among the pigeons, I guess, but it's all very unclear at the moment. So, for example, the US says they don't think that's imminent. We talked last week about how this all kicked off. We mentioned the return of Israeli citizens to their homes in the north. Since October, and just for context, last year when Hamas launched those attacks on Israel and Israel retaliated, Hezbollah has been launching these strikes in the north. Israel has been responding, as we say. Over 60,000 Israelis have been displaced, have not been able to return to their homes. A year later, it's becoming a real political issue for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, clearly people are growing very impatient when it comes to Israel. And Kate, this week's events also coincided with the United Nations General Assembly meeting in New York. It's an annual thing. It's quite a long program, that General Assembly, but there's a few days where leaders gather, they give their statements about what's on their minds when it comes to issues across the world. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese didn't go to that, even though he was in the United States last weekend. We were represented by Foreign Minister Penny Wong. US President Joe Biden was there. Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, was there as well, which I thought was really interesting. Getting those people in a room is just quite a fascinating thing. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu there as well.
Yeah, he arrived in New York yesterday. He'll address that General Assembly early this morning, so Saturday morning, our time. He's obviously walked into intense diplomatic negotiations where US and European officials are putting pressure on both sides, so Hezbollah and Israel, to accept a proposed 21-day halt in the fighting. That's to give time for diplomacy and to avert an all-out war. Plenty of headlines saying, is war imminent?
Yeah, there really is. So Australia was one of the countries to sign a joint statement calling for that ceasefire, just to down tools for a little bit so they could have more talks. The idea isn't that they'll be able to solve this. It's just to enable talks without more damage being done. The United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia also joined that. From what the sides have been saying about it, though, you'd have to think that it's going to be really tough to get it done.
Netanyahu hasn't been open to any kind of deals like that. It's a tricky bit of timing because it's also very close to the 1-year anniversary of the 7th of October, those Hamas attacks on Israel. You'd have to think, and reading the commentary, it's unlikely that Netanyahu, who is known for being very hardline, will back down on really anything.
Yeah, exactly right. And just to bring it back to Australia, lots of headlines here too about our government calling on Australians in Lebanon to get out of there. If they want to stay, that's up to them. But if they have an inclination to go, they need to go now. The government's been pleading with them for weeks and months to do that.
This isn't new.
Yeah. There's about 15,000 Australian citizens, they say, in Lebanon. This number increases to several thousand more during the summer in Lebanon, and that summer has just ended.
You could see the Prime Minister this week getting frustrated that people weren't going or maybe not listening, because he has been, as we said, he has been saying this for some time. Commercial flights in and out of Beirut are being cancelled because of airstrikes in the area. We have Australian Defence Force personnel stationed in the Middle East. If things get bad, they might be called in to help evacuate people, but they really don't want it to come to that.
They really don't want it to come to that. And look, we mentioned a little bit earlier that war between Hezbollah and Israel in 2006. If you're someone of a certain age, you'll remember this was a really big issue for Australia back then. We had thousands of Australians in Lebanon, and it was the setting for a really epic evacuation of Australians from the area.
I'm just reminded of those scenes when the Taliban took Afghanistan and trying to get Australians out there. Not saying it will be anything like that, but even if you wanted to look to some more recent history, that's something to point to.
Well, it kind of was back in 2006. This is one of the interesting things I have firmly set in my brain. So just to give you the numbers on that, because it'll probably come up a bit over the coming weeks, Australia evacuated 5,300 Aussies from Lebanese ports. We had to charter ships, 17 ships. There were some aircraft, but the airports were closed. So in the early days, they were able to get some aircraft out. 22 Australian aircraft did that. 470 buses. It was all coordinated by our Department of Foreign Affairs.
Operation Ramp. It was known as. We also helped 1,200 foreigners leave with the cooperation of Syria, Jordan, Cyprus and Turkey. It was our largest ever evacuation and as we said, the government really wants to avoid having to do that again. Other news stories that were big this week start with supermarkets. So on Monday, we saw the ACCC announce they're suing Woolies and Coles. The accusations are only pointed at Woolies and Coles. I wanted to clarify that point. There are other supermarkets.
There are IGA, Audi, plenty of those, but no other supermarket operators were named in that lawsuit. What they're accused of doing is selling certain products at their regular price for about 180 days, even longer, and then increasing the price by about 15% for a very short period of time, so 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then dropping the price to either the long-term average or a bit more than that, and then claiming it's a special.
Yeah, advertising as a discount. So let me unpack that a bit, because the example that's being thrown around is Oreos, which has just made me want to buy a packet of Oreos, if I'm honest, all this talk about Oreos this week. But here is what happened with Oreos. So from January 1, 2021 until November 27, 2022, Woolworths offered the Oreos for sale at the regular price of $3.50 on a pre-existing Prices Dropped promotion. So Prices Dropped is the Woolies promotion, Down Down is the Coles promotion.
Yep.
On November 28, 2022, the price was increased to $5 for 22 days. On December 20 of the same year, the product was placed on a Prices Drop promotion, the ticket showing it was down to $4.50 and its price was $5. Are you still with me? Sort of.
It's very detailed.
It's very detailed.
I like
this is the story.
I like the specific dates that you've got here.
This is the story. So the Prices Drop price was $4.50, which was higher than the product's previous regular price of $3.50.
I think it's just easier to say.
It's easier to say this another way.
The prices were steady, then they were high, and then they were lower. And was it a special? I don't know. That's what the ACCC is claiming.
Well, this is the thing. It's an accusation at this point.
Yeah.
There's plenty of takes on this, whether they can do this, whether they should do this, whether it's price gouging, whether it's not. The supermarkets will argue that they did the right thing by increasing prices for their suppliers. So they argue that they're likely to argue costs went up, so prices went up. And then they still applied a discount, even though the cost of the Oreo itself had gone up over that time.
Yeah, I don't think they're claiming that they made a lot of money out of this, that there was some huge profit margin by increasing prices, that a lot of it was in conjunction with suppliers. But look, for full transparency, as we've talked about before, I worked at Woolworths. I was in the corporate affairs team. I feel like I should say that, even though I left like 8 years ago.
A long time
ago. What I do know, though, is supermarket pricing is dynamic. So it's particular with those dates. It's really interesting that they've got the pinpoint of you did this then you did this, then. So it's very important in building a legal case. But prices do go up and down all the time. The accusation, though, that there's some scheme to mislead consumers is the serious point, and that's something the ACCC takes very seriously.
Yeah, exactly. The government has also weighed in on this one because this one is political. Prime Minister Albanese said he wanted to protect Australians. He praised the ACCC for taking action. He even deployed a fair income.
You know, again, to seriousness, you know it's serious when the Prime Minister drops a fair income. What he said is the supermarkets what he said is what the supermarkets are accused of doing is not honest. It's not fair income.
It's kind of the pub testy kind of thing, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
So in response, he confirmed the existing voluntary food and grocery code of conduct will be turned into a mandatory code of conduct. He said the legislation will be introduced to the Parliament by the end of the year.
I'm doing a mental list of all the legislation that's going to be introduced by the end of the year. They've only got 3 sitting weeks, so it's going to be pretty frantic.
There's some data around how many pieces of legislation they get. They said they get through the parliament this year and how many days and how many. It's like more than one a day or something. Anyway.
They are hard at work in Canberra when they go there, that's for sure.
That's true. Yeah.
Yes. As for what happens next, so Woolies says that it's going to work with the ACCC. Coles says that it's going to defend the claim, so it's a bit further down that line. The ACCC says that it's seeking declarations, penalties, costs and other orders. Those other orders could include community service orders, which would mean that the supermarkets have to make big commitments to, say, registered charities that do meals for Australians in need.
I guess in fairness, they already do a significant amount in that space. But the question is, I guess, whether it makes it to court or not, or whether they settle and take a penalty. We'll just have to wait and see.
Indeed.
Also a big this week was the interest rates inflation data. If you got confused about my Oreo story, hold on. There's more numbers coming.
This is where I get to talk about the trimmed mean average of inflation.
No. Oh, no.
I won't torture you. And negative gearing to throw into
Well, let me give you, if we need it, the RBA kept rates on hold at 4.35%.
Yep.
Governor Michelle Bullock said there's no intention of cutting rates this year. She reiterated that point. On Wednesday, the Australian Bureau of Statistics released inflation figures for the month of August. Headline inflation was down to 2.7%. The bank's target band, if you remember and you've been playing along at home, is 2 to 3%. So that's within the band.
I reckon people all across Australia were going, ding, 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 we're within the target range.
Do you think?
Amazing news. I think it was a complete stop in the day.
Until then, you keep reading.
Exactly right. So the trimmed mean inflation measure. So take out the spikes, take out the big highs and the big lows and get to the guts of what's happening. That measure means that inflation is at 3.4%. So
how did we get to 2.7? It's got to do with the government.
The energy rebates. So, yeah, we've talked, of course, quite a bit over the last few weeks about accusations that the government's payment of those energy rebates that we're all getting now is actually having a big effect when it comes to measuring inflation. They took 18% off household electricity bills. It's quite significant.
I remember, when we got our bill this month.
We looked at
each other and we went, how is it so cheap? Oh, okay. It's the energy rebate.
Yeah, the government's actually subsidising that. So that energy rebate has significantly lowered that price, but it doesn't mean that when you look at everything else being equal, that inflation is coming down.
So we're still at 3.4%, which is outside the target rate, of course. On top of that this week, there was a debate about changing our negative gearing and capital gains tax arrangements. This is often a big election issue.
Before you rush to turn the podcast off, we'll make this very, very simple.
Keep listening, please. Please.
Oh, look, it's part of a conversation that we had last week about housing with the Albanese government's legislation being kicked down the road in the Senate. You'll remember that, no doubt, with great clarity. In short, all that negative gearing is a tax break for landlords. What it does is it allows them to claim a loss on their investment property to reduce their overall taxable income. I feel like we should leave it there because it's far from certain that the Albanese government's actually going to change anything at all.
And this is a really important point. If you saw that any news that the Albanese government is coming after negative gearing, how this came about was a well-sourced article in the SMH and the Age on Wednesday morning that said that Treasury officials were working on options to change the current arrangements. The quote is, preparing the ground for a bold new housing policy that could define the federal election. It wasn't like Albanese's announced anything on this.
If it does happen, it will be a big deal in the election, but it hasn't happened yet. And when you saw Prime Minister Albanese face the media on Wednesday, he was very wishy-washy about what was going on. So, yeah, we don't know exactly whether anything will come to pass. I guess the thing to clock is that it's contentious for about 1.3 million Australians who benefit from negative gearing arrangements on their investment properties. It's a policy that Labor has also taken to an election recently, making sure that they don't benefit so much from the tax system. Bill Shorten took that and it's raised as one of the policies that actually saw him lose the election.
He lost that election, exactly. Diddy.
Let's
do Diddy. This one's pretty grim, but I have had a lot of people saying to me, like, what is this story? And for my own benefit, I was like, this one's been around for a while, so let's get across it. Who is Diddy? Let's start with that, because I think a few people listening will be like,
Yep.
who on earth are you talking about? His name is Sean Combs. He's gone by the name, as I said at the top, Puff Daddy, P Diddy, Love, others as well. He's an American rapper, actor, producer, entrepreneur. I feel like he really came to the fore in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. People might know the song I'll Be Missing You. I feel like that's his sort of earworm song.
That whole era of music that you always give me a lot of flack for enjoying to a great degree.
Well, he's been cancelled, so you can't enjoy it anymore.
True.
But most of his stuff is collaborations,
Yeah.
but he's certainly a very, very big name in entertainment.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who's made a lot of money from the scene and has been quite diverse. He hasn't just had a music career, as you say, he's been quite a significant entrepreneur as well. He had a reputation through all those years of throwing really big, infamous star-studded parties. We'll get into those a bit more at the end. But the reason we're talking about this week is that he was arrested in New York. That happened a few weeks ago. He's facing multiple charges for sex trafficking by force, for racketeering, and transportation to engage with prostitution.
I never really know what racketeering is.
It depends. It's one of those legal terms, but essentially it means that you're making money from illegal activities.
Right, okay. All very serious accusations. What prosecutors say is he used threats, abuse and coercion to satisfy his sexual desires and cover up his actions. It's not the first time he's faced charges like this.
No. So last year, the singer Cassie, she filed a civil lawsuit against him. She says that he had subjected her to coercion by physical force and drugs as well. He had assaulted her and raped her. That's what she says. He's denied those claims and the case was settled a day later. But in May this year, it really blew up at that time. This is what you're talking about. It's been around sort of in the news for a bit. CNN published hotel footage. It was CCTV footage. It was from 2016. In that footage, you can see him beating up on her.
Yeah, it's really hard to watch. After that surfaced, Combs released a statement saying that he was truly sorry, that it was inexcusable. He said he'd sought professional help. I wanted to touch on a term, though, that if you are reading about this story is coming up a bit, freak-offs.
Yeah, freak-offs. So it's a term that really first came to light when Cassie went public with her allegations. What they're referring to are these multiple-day big sex parties. He would allegedly force her to have sex with male sex workers while he watched. It's also mentioned in the charges that he's currently facing as well.
We've got the Cassie claims. We now have 8 other women and 2 men who have filed similar civil cases against him. Some of these things go way back to the 1990s, and those all came before his arrest on the 16th of September. So now we're at the present day. As it stands, we don't know when the trial will be. He, though, is in custody. His team offered $50 million for bail. The court denied it this week for the second time. If he's found guilty, he could face up to life in prison.
Yeah, and as we said, he denies the allegations. He says he's innocent. He says he looks forward to clearing his name in court.
The reason why this is also bigger than him is that many celebrities attended these parties, and there are stories resurfacing over the last 2 weeks of who was there and who knew what and who should have said something if they did know. So it's all very gross stuff. It's not a nice story, but it certainly is a big one.
And it's one of those ones too that I think I've seen it in the news. Obviously, I'm on the news sites all the time, as you are. But if you open up your social media apps, there are reels after reels of
stuff.
People putting Diddy next to ex-celebrities standing next to him, having a great time. Clearly, there's a lot of pressure building on those people who were with him in those days.
So now you know what that's all about. A message now from BHP. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the production of copper is critical. That's why BHP has committed to a wind and battery agreement to help power their copper mine at Olympic Dam in South Australia. It's happening now at BHP. Visit bhp.com/coppercritical to find out more. Long-time squizzers know we're fans of Zoe Foster-Blake, so partnering with her skincare brand Go-To was an easy choice. Go-To does what it says on the tin. It's luxe skincare that works, without putting stress on your wallet. Find your Go-To at gotoskincare.com. Coming up, it's the AFL Grand Final today. So pumped. Can't wait. So much fun to be had.
So many sausage rolls.
I don't know what I'm going to do for snacks. I haven't I will have a think about.
That's where my mind
Yeah, that's
goes
actually
first.
a really good idea. I will. Yeah, I'll put some thought into that.
I always make that edamame dip. It's an AFL Grand Final.
Can we put
staple.
that in our recommendations?
Yeah, let's do that.
That is delicious.
Yeah, it's a good one.
For anyone not interested in the football, there's a lot that goes on around the AFL Grand Final. Katy Perry is performing. Bit of reporting I saw that she wanted to do new songs because she's got new music out. The AFL wanted her to do her bangers, of course. I believe she's performing one new song.
There's a whole, like, you could go down the whole Katy Perry rabbit hole about her new album.
Oh, there's a whole thing. Yeah,
it's a whole thing at the moment.
Her whole look and her whole vibe. And
so that kind of makes me chuckle that she wanted to do all her new songs.
Well, I don't know if that's true, but that's what they've been saying.
Yeah. Cody Simpson, he's going to sing the national anthem.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. Christine Anu, Zipporah Corsa Anu as well, mother and daughter duo. They're going to perform the First Nations ceremony alongside the Songlines Youth Choir. I love a bit of pre-entertainment.
Because I feel like the AFL Grand Final pre-game entertainment is just up for judgment.
Oh,
like
yes.
I mean, do we want to talk about meatloaf?
And true. And too, then the comparison into the NRL finals about who did it best.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. The main game is the game, of course, the Sydney Swans versus the Brisbane Lions. First time since 2006 there hasn't been a Melbourne team in the grand final. Brisbane were in last year's grand final, Claire. They got done by Collingwood. They didn't win the flag. The Swans last played a grand final the year before that, and they also lost. So these two teams have been sort of top of their game for a few years but haven't managed to win.
They'll be hungry for the win.
Yeah. 2:30 p.m. is kickoff. NRL finals continue too this weekend. Melbourne and the Roosters played last night. Penrith and Cronulla tonight. All the odds are on a Melbourne-Penrith grand final. I would love to see an upset to that.
I, as we've talked about, know a tiny little bit about NRL. You follow it way, way, way more closely than I do. I feel like Penrith have just been dominant for years and years.
Melbourne.
And Melbourne too.
Like, this is why it would just be nice to see something different happen, but I think that's fairly unlikely. The Bledisloe, we didn't mention it last week. That's the rugby test between Australia and the All Blacks. I think we should mention it because we nearly got them last week, which is a really big deal, 31-28. I love how the news of out the Wallabies is now when we nearly win. We nearly won.
Credit where it's due. They did get very close and the Kiwis are formidable. So.
They are. They play again at 5 o'clock today. The Wallabies have not won the series since 2002. We actually can't win the series now because it's only 2 matches, so all we can do is draw by winning today.
And that epic stat too about not winning in New Zealand.
Exactly.
It would be huge. Even if they got close, it would be a really big achievement, I think.
That's right, because that obviously is being played. I think it's in Wellington from memory. Moving through the week, on Wednesday, it's the vice presidential debate.
I'm got popcorn plans for that one.
Maybe the edamame dip for you that day.
No, I think I'll overdose on that. I won't be ready for another go by the time we get to then. Senator J.D. Vance, he's squaring off against his Democratic opponent, Tim Walz, who, of course, is the Minnesota governor. 2 very different blokes. You've got like the footy coach from Minnesota versus the ultra-conservative J.D. Vance. So, yeah, it's going to be super interesting, that one. It's their only scheduled debate. Not usually seen as a huge draw card for voters, but it doesn't look like we're going to get another presidential debate. So it really is the time to do it.
Yeah. So that's 11 a.m. our time on Wednesday. On Wednesday night, I mentioned it earlier, the Dally M Awards, which is the NRL's Brownlow. Stay tuned next week for our opinions around the red carpet there because that's what we do on this podcast.
Apparently that's what we do now. Yep.
Also on Wednesday, busy day, start of Fat Bear Week.
And look, I know you're probably all sick and tired of me talking about Fat Bear Week, but it's going to be fun. We're even overdosing with a squish shortcut. We're going to talk about Fat Bear Week and its origins and looking at how all this good work around the world to preserve animals, flora, fauna, all of that. We're going into it.
It's the 10-year anniversary of the tournament.
Yes.
It is a tournament where you can vote for your favourite fat brown bear before they go into hibernation.
Because they're chonky.
Yeah.
And they've eaten all the salmon.
That's right. And it is, like, the gallery is far better than the red carpet galleries. This is the gallery of all galleries, according to the Squiz. Last year for Christmas, I actually got you a framed poster of Grazer, the winner.
The winner. It's amazing. It's on my shelf over my desk.
How am I going to top that this year?
Well, that's a good question.
Squiz recommends. I gave you 3 last week, so it's absolutely your turn. Sorry about that. That was very greedy.
I could go on forever. However, I'll make it very short. 2 shows that are very news related, a very raw scandal. It's about that story about the BBC interview with Prince Andrew. It's the second sort of movie to come out about this. Watched it last weekend, really enjoyed it. It's on Prime, so go and have a look at that.
I heard good reviews. Michael Sheen.
It's just such a cracking story.
Yeah.
And their perspective of the host as Emily Matlas is just really interesting. So she's the one behind this version of it. So it's a good one. I've also started Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story. That's on Netflix. Kate, your
lots of attention. Oh, well, look, I think people know now.
You're not into that.
I'm just not into the gruesome stuff. But it's getting a lot of attention.
It was such a huge, I remember it really clearly. I was just finishing university when all of that was happening, and it was such a huge news story for years. So it really does bring me back to that time. It's a fascinating story. So if you've got a bit of a sort of strong stomach, it's a good one.
Yeah, okay. I feel like I'm going to have to watch it just because it's being talked about so much.
As a news thing, yeah.
Yeah, but probably a good word of warning. Squiz Press. I mean, we didn't win an Umbrella Publish Award.
Look, we did mention that we were in the finals.
Did we?
Yeah, we did last week.
Yeah,
for News Club, for the News Club newsletter. Galah won Newsletter of the Year. And look, we have recommended to Squizzers that they sign up to the Galah
and it's a great newsletter.
So I think we should kind of take credit for that.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to finish this podcast. We just didn't win.
We didn't win.
We kind of thought we were going to as well.
I was pretty confident. But look, Annabelle, we can't take any credit for Annabelle's massive achievements with Galah. She's incredible. And we're really, really thrilled. We're in the
phase of the business where we're like, oh
yeah, this is tough. But look, it was great. I went to the event on Thursday night. Lots of Digital Publisher Alliance people winning lots of big awards. Broadsheet. Nick Shelton won the major award. Yeah. Future Women won podcasting awards. Really terrific to see.
Yeah.
Independent publishing going strong.
Going very strong. Just not us.
Just not us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Weekly Wrap. Look out in your feed this week the trailer for the upcoming interview series, which I'm very excited about, actually. It's going to be around the big issues of our time, of the moment. We've got some international guests. We've got some local returning guests that were super popular. I need to just pull together the wording for that, write the trailer, and it will be out throughout the week.
It's going to be an exciting one, this one.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Have a great weekend. Chat next week.